So David, last time we met, here in this very room actually, we were talking about freedom of speech in the academic world. But today, we have you in front of the camera because you are a candidate for the People's Party of Canada.
That's right, yeah. Cambridge, North Dumfries.
Cambridge, North Dumfries.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just down the road. Why the PPC and why not the Conservative Party, which I understand wanted you to run for them?
You know, that's an interesting question because I hadn't even considered politics at all. And it was during the free speech and Lindsay Shepherd debacle that I was courted by the Conservatives at the time. I was at a rally, and some people higher up in the party came and said, would you consider running as the Conservative nominee for your local riding? And at the time, I wasn't interested at all. And it would involve going to Ottawa, and I've never been really involved in political parties myself. But I talked it over with my wife. We thought that maybe this was something that needed to be done. It was really a matter of if you want somebody else to do it, maybe you should say, would I do it myself, right? You can't keep abdicating responsibility. And I saw at the university that the reason that we got into the hot water we have is because good people just don't serve on committees. Good people don't get behind the policies at a university level, and I see that happening also at the federal level, at the provincial level. So ultimately, after a few months, I decided, okay, I will make a run for politics, and I met with the people in the Conservative Party at my regional level, and I filled out the nomination form. And I'd sent it in, and I was all set, and then I began to meet with people, upper level people, and saying, here's what I'm interested in. Here are the things that I'm going to be talking about. And it made them uncomfortable because they said, you know, we've got to be careful. We don't want to lose this election. We don't want to say things that will upset the majority of voters. And I wasn't saying anything incendiary. I mean, I'm a civil person and a respectful person. But on issues related to immigration, on issues related to identity politics, things that are really serious concerns here in Canada, they were uncomfortable.
But you can understand why they would be uncomfortable.
Well, because potentially it will lose votes for them. But would you rather lose a few votes or lose the whole country, right? And I really think we're heading in that direction. So I was a little bit disenchanted, and then suddenly on the scene comes Maxime Bernier and the People's Party. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to be with the People's Party. I just knew that I was disenchanted with the Conservatives. And I just through good fortune, I was able to actually have a phone call with Max. I wanted to see what he was all about. And he'd known about me from the free expression stuff that had been going on, and I was interested with him, and so I reached out to him as well. And in talking with him, I said, here are the things I want to talk about. How do you feel about that? He said, absolutely. We need to talk about those things. We need to have the hard conversations. And after he gave that kind of permission, I knew that that was the party that I needed to settle on. And in fact, it's the party that I think Canadians are looking for. I think that people are really tired of the political correctness that is stifling important debate. So ultimately, that's how I settled with the PPC.
But I can only imagine that if you were a member of Parliament for the PPC, and you spoke in favor of supply management, I'm sure that Maxime would give you a talking to. Don't you think so?
I think so. And as a member or as a candidate for the PPC, you also have to sign on for the policy statements that the PPC is going to be standing for. And one of the things is we are against supply management. We're against supply management because it harms the poorest Canadians. I mean, if you've seen any of the economic projections on this, average Canadians spend about $600 more on eggs and poultry and dairy than what they should, and it's because of supply management. So I'm good with that, and I'm good with all the other policies of the PPC. And so I think it's right for a political party to be able to say, here are our policies, this is what we stand for, and Canadians want to know, what do you stand for? But the joy of being a PPC member is, outside of these policies, you can bring forth the things that are important to your constituents, you can bring forth the things that are important to you, And this is not what is done in these other parties.
This is interesting because I ran for the Canadian Alliance. And at that time, that was the way of doing things for that party. They had a list, I believe, of 30 policies that you had to agree to, and the rest of it is either by the opinion of your constituents, to the best you could gauge it, or your own conscience. That's
Right.
what Preston Manning said, and Stockwell Day said, and and I'm saying, yeah, I can do that, and so I ran for them. So, tell me that the Conservative Party gave you a list of policies.
The Conservative Party, and again, the discussions were very superficial, and it was just me feeling around for what they would accept and what they wouldn't accept. But my sense was they're not looking for candidates, they're looking for sheep. They're looking for people who will be able to be led, who will listen to a leader. And even, I'm sure that Andrew Scheer is a nice guy, but he's not a leader. A leader has vision. A leader is willing to make bold proclamations. And at every turn, he's shown that he's not willing to do that.
But surely the idea of being part of a political party is that you have a leader and that you vote the party way. Otherwise, you're an independent.
True enough. And you should agree with the policies, but you want to see policies that aren't afraid to make bold statements. Right now, we have a crisis of leadership. And everyone is really embracing what has been the traditional status quo for fear of alienating the populace. But the populace is now showing us they're rewarding really bold politicians. Mm-hmm. Take a look at Doug Ford. He is the most politically incorrect guy. He was unknown in provincial politics, and he was voted in on a really strong majority because he's politically incorrect, mm-hmm. because he was willing to say bold things. We look at the CAQ in Quebec. Same story. Here's a relatively new party that suddenly is now governing the province of Quebec. We look at the United Conservatives. They were only formed a year ago, and now they're the government of that province.
Jason Kenney is premier.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And what we see worldwide is that people are tired of the status quo, and what they want is someone who's willing to say, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to be bold. Because there is a crisis of courage as well. Crisis of leadership, crisis of courage, and I think that the PPC under Max is the alternative to the status quo.
Now, Canada, in its long history, has only been run by one of two parties, by other names, Liberal and Conservative, no other. Not Social Credit, not NDP, even though those parties existed, and still exist, some of them. What makes you think that the PPC can break that kind of tradition?
I alluded to it earlier, that we are at this really freakish point in history when people no longer have brand loyalty to a party. Instead, they are looking for authenticity in a leader and courage in policy. So we're already at this point in history. Another thing to consider is that we have people who are always looking for a reason to vote, but they don't find a reason to vote, and so they don't. So just to give you an example, 40% of Canadians don't vote. 40% of eligible voters do not vote. And when you survey them and you say, why don't you vote? Because I don't see anyone who is really putting forth policies with vision. Well, we have an alternative to that now. We have the PPC who really is presenting bold, new policies, whether it's related to supply management or whether it's related to immigration, whether it's related to the getting rid of interprovincial tariffs. I mean, these are bold, and we want to revamp the entire income tax system so that anybody under 100,000 only pays 15%, anybody over 100,000 pays 25%, and that's it. We're at a point, let me just riff on this idea of the income tax for a moment. There was a report that showed when people call Revenue Canada and ask them questions related to the Income Tax Act and the income tax legislation and rules, it's not 50%, it's less than 50%, but let's say 30 to 20% of the time, they get it wrong. Even the experts in Revenue Canada don't know because it's so convoluted. So we're going to revamp that, and that's bold too. And for people who are looking for tax relief, that's incredible. The other thing, we're actually a party that is willing to say, Canada is good. I mean, everybody who chooses this country knows Canada is good. But for whatever reason, our politicians are afraid to say Canada is good.
Our Prime Minister said,
Prime Minister.
We have no culture. We are the first postmodern or post-nationalist state.
Exactly. It's like there's an embarrassment. Canada, if our society is going to fall, it's not going to fall because there's some kind of external threat. It's going to fall because of this internal weakness. And the way that you combat that is you say, I am proud to be Canadian. We have values, and we have a traditional concepts and traditional characteristics within the very fabric of our nation that has made it great and will continue to make it great. And let's talk about that, and let's be proud of that, and let's encourage that. And that's what when people say, I'm proud of Canada, that means they're going to stand up for Canada. And your internal threat's gone. When people really love their country, that's the strongest defense that a country can have.
David, wish you well.
Oh, thanks very much.